everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle.Handmade.Designs, and in this video I am giving you a quick pattern review before we head over to the sew along for the next project, which is project number 5 in the Sew What series. Yes, we are making our way through the Sew What series this year. So this Sew What series is all basically sew along based. So if I could think about it, we can definitely get a sew along to it, okay? Now before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into a very quick pattern review and then off to the sew along. And if you don't know by now, I put chapters in my sew along so you can skip through or rewind back and get to whatever part that you need to get to. Now don't forget, this is a lap zipper skirt, so the sewing of the skirt is the same. It's just me installing the lap zipper, but I'm walking you through all the step of the way of the sew along, okay? So let's go ahead and get to the pattern description. So first of all, the pattern number is McCall's 3830. It has been reissued into McCall's 8051 as well. If you don't have the pattern, pick it up during the next McCall sale because you will have time to pick it up and sew along with me, okay? So for the pattern description, this is a missus skirt in 5 lengths. It has 2 front darts, 2 back darts. It also has a faced waist, which is waist facing, and then it also has a back zipper. Now the zipper is not an invisible zipper, it is an exposed zipper. However, I do a lap zipper instead of just your center back zipper that's exposed, okay? So that is the pattern description for this pattern. Let's talk about skill level. So the skill level for this pattern, I'm not sure if it's rated on the website, but this is a super easy pattern to do. I did McCall's 3830. The reissued pattern is McCall's 8051. In the sew along, you will see why I went ahead and used the old pattern, because you can still get the new pattern, okay? So whenever I decide to stop tracing patterns, I could just go ahead and throw that pattern out and still have a fresh cut of the new pattern. All right, let's talk about notions used. The only thing that you're going to need as far as notions is basically your interfacing as well as a 7-inch all-purpose exposed zipper. That's it. Let's talk about the fabric used. So I'm gonna put it up on the screen for the fabric used, but it is a bright rainbow star fabric, hashtag Pride Month, okay? So in honor of National Pride Month, I went with a fun, bold pride, every color you can name of the rainbow stars foil fabric that I picked up from Joann's, but I will put it on the screen and it will also be in the description box below as well. All right, let's talk about pattern pieces. So the pattern pieces used is, I think it's 4. You have your front, your back, and your facing pieces. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you decide to do the carriers, which is an option, that's pattern piece number 5 as well. This pattern, you really do not need to add any pockets because it would look a little awkward to do, kind of like a pencil skirt with pockets. It just seems a little weird to me, so I did not add pockets onto that. Speaking of pattern pieces, let's talk about pattern sizing. So for this pattern, I think the first envelope comes in 6 to 14, and then the second envelope is 14 to 22. The size that I cut was a size 18. So for the waist, I cut a size 16 and then graded it out to an 18 by the time I got to the hips. That's what I did for my pattern, all right? So let's talk about modifications. Did I make any modifications to the pattern? The only thing that I did differently was the lap zipper. Also in this sew along, you will see that I cut the fabric belt, but I did not show how to do the fabric belt on the sew along, simply because if you go to my video, McCall's 8119, where I did a romper and it's a sew along, in that video it tells you how to do a fabric belt. I also did not add the carriers on yet, but I will add my carriers on once I take this skirt off, because I did this yesterday, right? Finished it up, ran outside, took photos, and because I want to wash all the ink off of it and everything on the inside of the fabric, I did not get a chance to put the carriers on because I was fighting against the sun. All right, so that's the only modification that I did for this pattern. Did it look like the photos or the drawing on the pattern envelope? Yes, it does. It looks exactly like what you would see on the pattern envelope. Nothing different whatsoever. Likes and dislikes. I don't have any dislikes. It's all likes. This is the third time that I have done the skirt. I have done it in a woven before. I have also done this in a knit as well. So if you're doing it in a knit, make sure, take note of the negative ease. If you're doing it in a woven, make sure you add a little bit of ease so it's not completely snug, but you want it snugged enough, all right? If you do not want to do the facing, make sure you add a waistband, and you can still do the lap zipper with a waistband as well, all right? Let's talk about first time experiences. Did I have any first time experience? Absolutely not. No, everything I have done before. Let's talk about would I sew it again? Yes, I would sew it again. Yes, I would recommend this pattern to others, which is why I did the sew along. And for my pattern rating, I am rating this pattern as a 5 out of 5. Now that is all for the pattern review. Let's go ahead and get into the sew along. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get into the next sew along for the Sew What series. This is project number 5, the lap zipper skirt. Now this is basically a pencil skirt, but instead of doing an exposed zipper or a invisible zipper, I am going to do it as a lap zipper, okay? So now before we get started into this, let's go ahead and cover the tools and supplies that you will need in order to construct this lap zipper. But first, if you are using the new pattern, I will be using McCall's 3830, but you can use the new reissue pattern from early spring 2020, which is McCall's 8051. So let's go ahead and get into the tools and supplies you need in order to construct project number 5, the lap zipper skirt. All right, so let's talk about the tools and supplies that you need in order to construct this lap zipper skirt. So you're gonna need your basic tools like your marking tools, your pencil, your seam ripper, scissors, and pins. Those are your basic tools that you should have in your sewing kit. The additional items that you will need is I use a rotary cutter, one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there. You will need a point turner because we will be working with a facing piece, which you will need to poke out and make sure that it's nice and clean as well. You will need a 7-inch zipper. Now do not use an invisible zipper, use an all-purpose zipper or exposed zipper is what it's called, polyester zipper. You will see that it says all-purpose on the zipper, which will be exposed instead of invisible. I also have a ruler out because I need to mark, well, I already did it, but you need to mark your darts. I am also drafting a fabric belt, and I'll show you that here shortly. If you want a fabric belt or if you want any carriers on your skirt as well, okay? All right, so that's all the tools and supplies that you need in order to construct this skirt. So let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct your skirt. All right, let's talk about the pattern pieces that we need in order to construct this skirt. So now let me tell you a quick thing. I traced my pattern pieces out because I have used this pattern before when I was a little bigger. Okay, so so originally when I did this, I cut out a size 20 and then I lost some weight, cut out a size 16, and now I am cutting out a size 18 for this. Now the waist is a 16, but the hips is an 18. So that's why I went ahead and traced it all out so I could get my facing pieces as well as the hip pieces the exact same, to where when I piece it all together, it would pair up. I highly advise you do the same thing if you need to grate between two patterns, but if your waist and your hips can be cut in one pattern, you don't have to trace it. But because these patterns go out of style quickly, I advise you to start tracing the patterns that you know that you may have to do 2 and 3 times, okay? But once again, this is McCall's 3830, which is also reissued to McCall's 8051. Now this is pattern piece number 1. You will be cutting to a fabric. Let me turn it this way. This is pattern piece number 1, the back. You need to cut to a fabric. Make sure you transfer all your notches and your dots as well. This is pattern piece number 2. You need to cut 2 unfold of fabric. Now, if you look at all of this stuff right here, I'm just going to tell you, I measured the pattern pieces to give these to you because it's not on the pattern tissue paper. So for the waist measurement is not on the pattern tissue paper. So for the finished waist measurement after seam allowances are taken out, size 16, you will have a finished waist measurement of a 32.75, which I think they round up and go to 33. For an 18, 34.75, which they round up to a 35. 20, you would get a 36.75, which they round up to a 37. And then a 22, you would get a 39.75 and they round up to a 40. Now for the finished hip measurement, a size 16 is a 44, size 18 is a 46, size 20 is a 48, and size 22 is a 50. So like I said before, my waist is a 33 now, okay? So because my waist is a 33, I want about a good ½ inch to an inch ease, you know, in room. So what I am doing is I'm going to cut a size 16 and add a ½ inch, which is 1/8 to the side seam of my facing pieces, which are right here. And then for the hips, I am cutting a size 18, which gives me a 46. Now my hips is a 44.5 right now, so I need a good 1.5 to 2 inches of ease. And the reason for that is because I'm using woven fabric instead of a knit fabric like I did before. So when I did this before, it was easy for me to cut the 16 both at the waist and at the hips because it falls into what I was at that time. But because of COVID and all that good stuff, some of us have gained a couple of pounds, and I'm not ashamed to say I gained some pounds, and I'm working to lose that by the summer anyway. So without further ado, into, you know, going off topic, let's go ahead and get into the back and front facing. So the back facing is pattern piece number 3. I'm going to move pattern piece number 2 out. Pattern piece number 3 is the back facing. You need to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. And then pattern piece number 4, which is your front facing, you need to cut 1 unfold of fabric and 1 unfold of interfacing. Now this comes together really, really easy, and it's only 4 pattern pieces. However, like I said, if you want to do carriers and a fabric belt, these are the things that you will need to do. So first thing, modification, fabric belt. Now what I did was I draft this and I put it on the fold. So when I open it out, it will give me a measurement of 41 inches and the height would be 2 inches. Now in order to draft this fabric belt, what you need to do is do your waist measurement plus 3 inches, okay? So if your waist is a 32, plus 3 inches, and that 3 inches gives you an actual belt, okay? So let's say that my waist is a 33, plus 3 inches is 36, and then you have a fold line to tuck that piece underneath your buckle at 2 inches. So 36 plus 2 is 38 inches, okay? Add your seam allowance after that. So you have 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and because this is 2, you need to multiply that by 2, which gives you 1 1/4. So once again, 33 plus 3 is 36, plus the fold line is 2 inches, which is 38, plus the seam allowance is 39 1/4. Now I made mine 41, give me enough ease that I want, because I will be making this as a actual belt instead of, if I have enough fabric left, instead of just a belt that's just going to be tied around my waist, okay? So mine is 41, but make it whatever length that you would like. Now regarding the height, I wanted a 2-inch height. So what I did was measure 2 inches. The top's going to be seam allowance is 5/8 and the bottom seam allowance is 5/8. So because of that, 2 inches plus 1 1/4, that's 5/8 plus 5/8 is 1 1/4, which means the height is actually 3 1/4. Once the seam allowance is removed, it will become 2 inches, okay? So I hope everyone got that. And the reason why my length right here is 20 1/2 by 3 1/4 is because I am cutting this on the fold. If you are not cutting yours on the fold, you will need to measure out the entire length and then the height, okay? And make that piece. Also, I want to draw your attention to the fold line. Make sure you mark a fold line 2 inches away from your side seam. That's where the buckle is going to fold over, and you're going to stitch that, okay? You do not want to lose inches by creating the fold line and you have forgotten to add the 2 inches, okay? All right, so that's all the pattern pieces that you need in order to construct this lap zipper skirt. Let's go ahead and get into the instructions. All right, so let's get into the instructions for this. Like I said, it's only 4 pattern pieces unless you want to add the carriers and the fabric belt. If you are doing the carriers, I have a tutorial on how to draft carriers, which I will link in the end screen and in the cards above. But you're just gonna make a strip of fabric. The length is 6 inches by 1.5 inch high. So 6 inches across, 1.5 inches up and down, and close out that box, okay? Now, my fabric is 44 inches lengthwise, okay? I am also cutting a size 18, so I will follow the cutting layout for size 18. Just make note that pattern piece number 2 is right side of your fabric facing down on the fabric, and you're going to cut around. All the other pieces you would turn with the right side of your pattern piece facing up, okay? Also, make note that you will interface your facing pieces, which is pattern piece number 3 and 4. The seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance unless otherwise indicated. If you are unsure of what things mean, make sure you take note of the pattern marking, your grain line, your fold line, button holes, markings, and all that good stuff. But this tutorial will not have anything to do with buttons, okay? So make notes of your notches, your dots, and all that good stuff. Also, make note of the glossary, how to do your slip stitch, edge stitch, E-stitch, blind stitch, finishing. Now I will be finishing all my seam allowance with my serger, but if you do not have a serger, you can either turn it under 1/4 of an inch and press up to that seam allowance and do it and stitch on the right side. So you can also use pinking shears. You have different ways of finishing off your seams or even a zigzag stitch. All right, so now I am doing view D in the instructions. So you can do whatever one that you want. The only difference is on step number 7 where it tells you to do the exposed zipper. We will do it as a lap zipper, which I will cover when we get to that section. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is make all my darts. So step number 1, 2, 3, and 8, I will do all together. I will make all my darts. After I make all my darts and press my darts to the center, I will attach my side seams, pattern piece number 1 and pattern piece 2 together at the side seams, okay? Make sure you serge or finish off the center back seam, which is pattern piece number 2. From the bottom to that dot, leave that section where the zipper go open, okay? After we do that, we will start constructing our facing pieces. I will not be using a hook and eye whatsoever. If you decide to do the carriers, you will do that in 15 and 16, and then we will finish off in hem in 19 through 20. Like I said, this is an easy to put together skirt. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this sew along. It's going to be very, very quick. So the first thing I need you to do is grab pattern piece number 1 and 2. You're going to do your darts. Now I have already done my darts to cut down on time, and we have done darts so many times in many of my sew alongs. So I did my darts in both my front and my back. So what you're going to do now is I have my back right here, which is pattern piece number 1. So after you have done your darts in both the front and the back, move pattern piece 1 out of the way. grab pattern piece number 2, and what you want to do before you pin this is go ahead and finish off your center back seam, which I'm going to do here shortly before I sew this up. But I'm going to show you what you're going to need to do. So what you're going to do is you have a dot right here. You're going to pin at the dot. After you finish off your center back seam, pin at the dot and pin all the way up to the top. Now this is the dot. From the dot up, you're going to be basting because that is where your zipper is going to be. Now I'm not going to baste this closed just yet. What I'm going to do is back stitch at the hem, and so all the way up to this dot, and then back stitch at this dot using a regular length stitch and 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my center back seam sewn just from the dot all the way down to the hem, I press the seams open. So now what you're going to do is go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1, which is your front pattern piece, and with right sides together, let me go ahead and grab my pattern piece number 1. And then with right sides together, you're going to pin front to back at the side seams, matching up your notches. You have a notch here, so you're gonna pin there. And then you're gonna pin the hem. So I'm gonna pin at the notch. I'm going to pin at the hem and then pin along the length of my side seam. So go ahead and pin your side seams now. All right, so now that I have my side seams pinned, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and then sew all the way up to the end and back stitch at the end of your side seam. After you do that, go ahead and finish off your seams. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the zipper area finished and everything all the way up to the dot, I pressed it open. So now what you're going to do is go ahead and move your skirt out of the way and grab your facing pieces, which are pattern piece number 3 and 4. Now you guys should know by now how to attach your facing piece, but I'll walk you through it. So this is pattern piece number 4, which was cut on the fold, which is your front. Open that out, and then what you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to attach your back on top. Now you should have notches, so you attach one side to the notch on the front pattern piece and pin at that notch, and I'm gonna pin at the top as well. And you're gonna do the same thing to the other side as well. So make sure you match up those notches right here, these 2 notches. Pin at that notch and pin at the top. Now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew down both side seams. Now, once you finish sewing them down, go ahead and press your seams open and finish off the bottom edge, bottom curved edge right here. That does not have any notches, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my facing pieces together, I attached them right sides together. At the side seams, finished off my seam allowance at the very bottom. Go ahead and grab your skirt and turn it right side out. And what you want to do is go ahead and pin your facing to your skirt with right sides together. So I'm going to start at the back and I'm going to pin there. Now make sure you are matching up your notches as well. So now that I have it pinned all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning and then sew all the way around your waistband and back stitch at the end. Once you do that, trim your seam allowance down and press your seam allowance up toward your facing. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have sewn from the hem all the way to the dot for my zipper, what I'm gonna do is go ahead and make sure that my seams for my waistband or the actual facing, make sure that match up because you do not want them to one be further down than the other one and then it's not matching up when you go to install your zipper. So pin at that seam, pin at the top, and then pin along your zipper area. So pin at that dot and then pin along your zipper area. Once you do that, starting at this dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you do not need to back stitch because you will be basting. So baste from this dot all the way up to the seam allowance line. Now you will not be basting all the way up. You're just going to stop where that seam starts, okay? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have from the dot all the way up basted, well, not all the way up until the seam line. Now I'm gonna go ahead and grab my all-purpose or exposed zipper. I'm gonna place the zipper part down. Now, this is one thing you want to do because this facing will be turned back onto itself like this. You do not want to place your zipper all the way up. So now what I'm going to do is try to go about 1/4 of an inch down and just kind of look and see where your zipper is going to be when it's finished. And then you could determine how far up and how far down you want to make it. Now I like to do mine about 1/4 of an inch down, to where when it's turned on itself, I'm looking for when it's turned on itself where my zipper will be, okay? So that's what you want to do. So I'm going to make a line about 1/4 of an inch down from that seam line. I'm just gonna use my ruler. And I just like to get in the habit of using my ruler to do certain things, because if you don't, then it will be a little on the jacked up side and you don't want those problems when you spend so much time sewing, okay? Now what I'm gonna do is place my zipper right there. So I'm gonna go just down a little bit, not much, but just a little bit. Now I'm gonna make sure that my zipper is centered with my seam allowance line, okay? And I'm just going to pin. So I'm going to pin just the seam allowance and only pin one side. So this side right here, your right side, you just want to pin that side down. Do not pin the other side down or sew the other side down. So go ahead and finish pinning just this one side now. Once you have this one side down, you're going to go to your sewing machine and just baste this one side down. Baste it down now. All right, so we're going to back stitch. Try to go as slow as possible. So I'm gonna go forward, back stitch, and then sew all the way down the zipper area without sewing on the zipper. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our zipper sewn on, let's go to the sewing table so I can show you the rest of the lap zipper method. So I have one side of my lap zipper done. We're going to do this side now. So what you want to do is I'm going to zip my zipper all the way up. I'm going to lay this other piece. I'm going to actually pin it, making sure it's completely lined up with my zipper tape. So the zipper tape is lined up with the edge of the zipper, making sure that your seam allowance right here of your facing lines up perfectly, and you want to pin that. So I'm going to pin that, and then I'm just going to make sure that my zipper is pinned the same, because you do not want half of it up and then half of it down, and then when you zip it up, it's just not correctly done, okay? Now I'm pinning the other portion on my zipper tape, but when I go to the sewing machine, I have to take these pins out. I'm just holding it there for stability, okay? Now that I have it pinned, what I'm going to do is turn my skirt right side out, and you want to get you some tape. Okay, so I have it right side out, and I'm going to get me some tape. I'm going to take this top pin out now that I have it pinned on the other side. All right, and I'm just going to get me some tape, and you'll see why I'm going to get some tape here shortly. So let me make sure that's nicely done. So grab you some tape. So I'm just gonna get a piece of tape. That looks like about enough right here. And you want to measure. If it's not enough, you could just get more than one piece. It's really not gonna matter. Now what you're gonna do is put one side of the tape about 1/4 of an inch from where you just stitched, okay? And you're just gonna place it down the center of your seam allowance, your zipper area, okay? So I'm going about 1/4 of an inch, okay? And you want to see where that stitching line stops as well, okay? Now, I have it taped, and what I'm going to do is, using my regular presser foot, all I'm gonna do is start from where the facing piece folds over to it on itself. I'm gonna start from right there. I'm using the tape as my guide, okay? So I'm gonna sew about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to use the tape as my guide and sew on the tape all the way down and across. Now make note of where your zipper stops when you sew across, okay? And it will lap over. Once you do that, go ahead and pull the tape off and we will continue. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so we're back at the sewing machine, and you will notice that my tape is 1/4 of an inch from the zipper area where we sewed on and did our top stitching. My width is back at 0.0, the length is 2.5, and the tension is still the same. Now I am using my 1/4 of an inch, which is the middle portion of my presser foot, as my guide to sew on the tape area, okay? So now I have my presser foot down, and what I'm gonna do is back stitch. Now make sure you are underneath that facing piece that's gonna be turned over. So you're gonna back stitch. I'm gonna go slow, okay? Back stitch, and then sew all the way down. Now I did move my zipper down a little bit so I'm able to sew. Now that I cleared that area, I'm gonna move my zipper back up, okay? Making sure my tape is still 1/4 of an inch away. Put my presser foot back down. Make sure you are clearing those pins. So if you have pins underneath, make sure you are not sewing on those pins. I'm going to remove one pin at a time. Make sure that it is good underneath and that I do not have any pins underneath whatsoever. Make sure it's flat. And now I'm gonna sew, making sure you get all the way down to the bottom where your zipper stops, okay? So let's go ahead and sew. All right, so now I'm approaching another pin. I'm going to look behind, get that pin out, make sure my fabric is back on my 1/4 of an inch line. Everything's looking good. And now I'm going to go ahead and finish sewing down and square off. So I'm gonna sew down. Now I'm towards the end of where the dot was, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my presser foot up and turn my fabric to clear that zipper area. Now, before you do that, you want to look to make sure, if you're unsure, that that's where your zipper stops. Now, it's kind of hard to tell, to be honest, on mine, but I'm going to look, and that looks like where my zipper stops. I just have my tape a little further down, so that's why I'm going to go ahead and turn, and I'm going to fill to make sure that we don't have any zipper. And then what you're going to do is just stitch across. So go ahead and stitch across now. All right, so now that I stitched across, I'm going to back stitch. And then clip my threads, lift my presser foot up, and I have a lap zipper. Now what you're going to do is go ahead and remove your tape. go ahead and do that now.
Alright, so right here I am doing a voiceover only because the camera died on me at this point. So the only thing that's left for you to do is go ahead and turn your facing onto itself, clear the zipper area by sewing that area, and then you're going to press up your hem at 2 1/4. If you need me to add a clip in on what to do with some muslin fabric, please just leave a comment below. Alright?
So there you have it. That is the full pattern review and the sew along. I hope you enjoyed this, and stay tuned for the next project number 6, which will be a pencil skirt. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video, and as always, keep sewing.